Being together in this space, we have all stretched ourselves through social distancing and are touching each other's hearts. Here we glimpse what we know life is. In addition to isolation, disease, and poverty, we see now the love, not instead of pandemic and injustice, but along with it. Thank you for stretching to be together. Today is Easter, a day to remember hope. Some of us, including myself, have almost forgotten hope because life has been so full of loss. Here on Easter, together, we practice reclaiming hope. We remember the greater vision and the power of love in a time of crisis. Preparing for this sermon, it was helpful for me to cast my memory back to another difficult time. In 2005, after a terrible loss of relationship, I decided to stretch out from my own despair towards a dream that I had, even though I could not feel that dream alive inside of my broken heart at that moment. So I traveled to Scotland. I participated in a 5-week intensive course at the eco-village called Findhorn. Findhorn is a community built intentionally to balance economic justice, spiritual depth, and environmental sustainability. The three together, a vivid dream I've carried in my heart for a long, long time when I remember to nurture that dream. I was there in Findhorn to learn about eco-villages, and what I really learned was active hope and muscular love. I want to share just 2 stories with 22 students from 18 countries during that time. And some of my fellow students lived then in poverty and some in repressive regimes. We were there to learn and to think together in order to create something new. Every day we studied about injustice, heard stories of unjust treatment, and learned more and more about environmental devastation on an international and global scale. It was terribly overwhelming. And yet we were able to stay with it week after week because every day we would garden, we would cook together from food grown locally. Sometimes we would make art and experiment with theater. We would dance and sing around a campfire. We co-created and we relished every beautiful thing in our path. The most potent lesson I learned is that every one of us needed joy. Every one of us needed real connection to each other and to engage with beauty in order to get beyond despair. Not just to pull ourselves out of despair, which was so real, but out into a space in which we could work together for a different kind of world. Every day, we learned yet more difficult truth, and then were guided to focus with deep intention to go beyond despair and move into our passionate commitment and creativity. With daily projects and experiments in beauty and joy, we found ourselves really present. And with that, we were able to be creative and together nurture out-of-the-box thinking. We worked together for local solutions to current disaster. We balanced despair with hope so we could then again imagine something new and make plans we then actually brought back into our own countries. We all returned home to build the life we knew was possible. And we knew it was possible because we were already living aspects of it together. In a time of crisis and pandemic, in a time of climate disruption, we need to be present as we can be. And for that, we need to remember hope. We need to practice nurturing it. We need laughter. We need rituals that move our hearts one moment at a time towards a greater vision. We need opportunities to see beauty and to create. Now, here is something I have kept relearning because I get down on myself. for being down. Sound familiar? Sound productive? No. Hope is not something you have or don't have. Hope is not something we're good at or we're not good at. Hope is something like a muscle that needs to be worked on in order to work well. Krista Tippett has been interviewing inspiring people for a long time, especially in her work on the national public radio program called On Being. I'll bet some of you know it. I love what she says about hope. She's the one who introduced me to the idea that hope is a muscle that we have to choose to work on and practice using. She says, hope, like every virtue, is a choice that becomes a practice, that becomes a spiritual muscle memory. It's a renewable resource for moving through life as it is, not as we wish it to be. She continues that it is crucial that we keep our hearts oriented towards what we want to build and create. Keep our hearts oriented towards what we're moving towards. The community of Findhorn had figured something out about this. Wisely, we students were taught that to face truth squarely and respond with creative thinking and passion, we needed hope and joy and grounding in practices that helped us know in our bones the possibility of living life in a different way. So here's the second story from Findhorn. We learned one morning in great depth about the widespread and the detailed stories of deforestation. Then with tears and heavy hearts, we got into vans and traveled to the Scottish Highlands. When we got out of the vans, we were handed baskets. As we walked up the hills, our host talked to us about why there were no Scottish pines here because of war and overpasturing of sheep. Then he told us about the organization he created. It was totally dependent on volunteers and had a vision of reforesting the entire Scottish Highlands, one tree at a time. He walked us to a small stand of ancient pines that still existed, and we began collecting the pine cones from underneath them. After hours of collecting, we returned to his home, where he showed us the different staging areas. Here was a place where seeds were carefully removed from the cones by hand. And there was a refrigerator where the seeds were placed to mimic a Scottish winter. And then there was a room where the seeds were planted at the right time in cups and placed in the right amount of sun. And he showed us the collars of piping that would protect the seedlings from deer and sheep once they were driven back up to the highlands and planted in the ground. The final thing I remember him telling us was that his organization not only had the vision of reforestation, but they had a 500-year plan. They had a 500-year plan. The implications of that are still working themselves in and around inside of me. Change happens over generations, and perhaps not in my lifetime. But when we can, as Krista Tippett says, keep our hearts oriented towards what we want to build and create and what we're walking towards, I know I'm not the only one who sometimes wakes in the morning feeling fearful or inadequate to the realities of the day. There is so much need and so much suffering. There is a regular stream of heart-numbing information overload and fear of what lies ahead of us and for our children's children. Human beings are not well equipped to exist on a diet of only crisis and despair. There are those of us in our world and in our congregations who are fighting to keep people alive, fighting to keep themselves alive, and others are trying to keep people safe in group living facilities. Finding respite from that overwhelm and despair is critical. Sometimes the dead weight of grief walks with us until we can't walk for a while. So then we must rest. Those of us who are in safer situations, those of us not weighed down by too much grief at the moment, need to reach out. We need to help by making masks, sending money, praying, making videos to thank those who help, sending cards and making phone calls, doing what is asked of us if we are able to do it. And those of us who are able in the moment have the job to nurture hope. We need to create the possibilities for hope to love and grow. Easter is about hope, right? Retelling the story of the resurrection of Jesus Christ brings hope of eternal life to Christians. It is also evoking a sense of belonging to a God who promises the people they will not be abandoned. The people belong and are loved always. This is a powerful, enduring message of hope. Unitarian Universalists who are also Christian know this. Those of us who do not resonate with Christianity also need to know that we belong and that we are loved. We need stories of hopeful resurrection, whether that is of Jesus or the cycles of life itself. We need experiences of being grounded or lifted by something much larger than ourselves as individuals. And here we bump into the reason I'm Unitarian Universalist. At Easter, and honestly on most Sundays, I can say that I believe in the redemptive and saving power of intentional community. Like Findhorn, our faith community, all faith communities who want to dig for the complex truth are also wanting to develop the muscular power of hope and love so we can make a new world right now and for the future. We know we need to go beyond saying what we believe because the purpose of being together is to actively practice what we say we believe, right? So we do that by creating covenant, a sacred agreement of how we intend to be together, knowing we will fail, knowing we need to invite each other back into covenant again and again, and knowing there are always more voices that need to be included to make new covenant that is more inclusive, more like beloved community of all. We're learning from increasingly diverse voices that it is more important to build the muscle of love and to act to create the world we hope for than it is to be certain that we are right. It is more important to create a sense of love and hope. It is more important for these than to be certain at all. We are actively exercising our muscles of hope and love together. I believe in the redemptive and the saving power of intentional community, built on intentions for how we are to be with one another. I believe in intentional community that is messy and painful, mundane, hilarious, and beautiful. I believe in the cycles of life and death and rebirth that move not only through nature, but through community that is teaching us, helping us restate and reclaim again and again what our vision of the future is and then begin to live it a piece at a time now. This Easter, this spring, this coming Ramadan, honor the best of your histories. Find and honor the stories of purpose that sing their meaning into your hearts and souls, even as there is so much trouble and pain. Laugh, sing and play songs, make wonderful food, color eggs and pray, learn new things, plant a garden, wear silly hats. Act like your vision of what a better life could be is actually taking place in this one place, at least here on earth. I want to read words from John Bannister Tabb. Out of the dusk, a shadow, then a spark. Out of the cloud, a silence, and then a lark. Out of the heart, a rapture, and then a pain. Out of the dead, cold ashes, life again. And again, Krista Tippett, hope, like every virtue, is a choice that becomes a practice, that becomes spiritual muscle memory. It's renewable resource for moving through life as it is, not as we wish it to be, so that it's crucial that we keep our hearts oriented towards what we want to build and create. Keep our hearts oriented towards what we're moving into. May it be so for us all. In the name of all that is holy and in all the holy names, blessed be, and amen. Now I get to offer these words from Reverend Safford from the West Coast. Ours is a mission to stand at the gates of hope, the kind of hope that is active and powered by love. May that joyful truth live in each of our hearts. Blessed be. And in the name of all that is holy and in all the holy names, blessed be and amen.